Hello Year 11. This is a chance for you to have a walkthrough of your Elizabethan England paper. This is combined with your Britain Health and the People paper as one SAT exam. Remember that, because although you only have an hour and 45 minutes on the paper, you actually will only have 50 minutes to complete this particular unit. Now, as you look through, you will see that on the front of the paper, you have 4 questions in total. Question 1 is worth 8 marks. Question 2 is worth 8 marks. Question 3 is worth 8 marks. And question 4 is worth 16 marks. So most of your marks are going to come in this question here. And if you remember our guidance, that is 5 minutes for an 8-mark question, and that will be 2 paragraphs. We'll go through that as we go through the questions. And on your last question, that's a 16-mark question, so that will be 20 minutes of your time and 4 paragraphs. Right, let's have a look.
Mr. Bowles, I'm just going to go the other side because you're a left-hander.
I am a left-hander.
So
yes.
I need to
throws things a little bit.
Shuffle over a little bit.
Okay, so you will need in this paper an interpretations booklet, which is this one
Do you
here.
get that one in the exam?
Absolutely, in the exam. And then this paper here, which you'll need to fill in with your centre number, candidate number, and your full name and signature, as you do with every other exam.
Perfect.
Right, let's have a look inside the paper itself. See that 4 distinct question types, and we'll look at question 1 first of all. It's an interpretation question. It's a source question, and this is the only question that you will need this interpretation booklet for. All right, so this question is all about how convincing a source is in relation to an individual, an event, a time period. And in this case, in this question, it's about Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, it could be about any particular individual you have studied or an event you have studied. It can be based on a picture, like this one is, or it could be on text as a written source. In this instance, it's a picture. We'll go through this, how to answer this particular question. Let's have a look at the question first of all. It is asking you to make a judgment about Sir Walter Raleigh, that's key, and how convincing this interpretation is, how convincing this opinion is of Sir Walter Raleigh. All right, so how convincing, that's the key. And it's also making sure that you refer to your own contextual understanding, your knowledge you're going to bring in to fill in the gaps in this answer. So let's have a look at the source first of all and consider what can you see here. Now, if you have a look closely, you can see, let's see, an interpretation of Sir Walter Raleigh. It depicts his dismissal from court. The picture was drawn for a children's storybook in the 1960s. Let's put that bit to one side for a minute, the provenance. Let's not worry too much about that. Let's consider, though, what we can see in the picture. The first thing you need to do, what can you see? Well, we can see Sir Walter Raleigh. Who else can you see in that picture? Well, another important person there would be this person here, and that is Queen Elizabeth. Probably not the best pen to show up here.
That's fine.
And you look around, who are these people? Well, they will be her courtiers. Those are the people in court. This is a picture of court, the Queen's court. All right. So let's have a look at these people. What can we see? Well, this guy here, He's got a bit of a sneer on his face. So's that guy. Look at them. They're looking at Sir Walter Raleigh. What impression do they have of him? Well, I think let's just link that to what we might know about court. Court is a very jealous place. These individuals are jealous of Sir Walter. All right. They're looking down on him. What do we know about Sir Walter Raleigh? Well, let's have a look. Look at his clothes. He's well dressed, which suggests wealth and status. Let's have a look at him. Look at his face. He looks like he's proud. Okay. He's not cowed by this. Okay, but he's walking away from the Queen. So let's go back to this interpretation. His dismissal from court. Now, what do we know about Sir Walter Raleigh? Well, we know he is one of the Queen's favourites. She likes him a lot. However, we also know that he's dismissed from court 1592 for marrying one of Elizabeth's ladies in waiting without permission.
What a crime.
Well, I know. He should have asked permission.
What a rogue.
He absolutely is. This is very much one of the worst crimes you could do. This has got the rumour monger, the rumour mill kind of working overtime here. This is bad form. So he is dismissed for going behind the Queen's back. This indicates the power of the Queen. She influences people's lives. She can hire and fire, and that's really important. So we've got a sense of an event here. Walter, very proud, walking away from the Queen who's dismissed him. So how do we...
Mr. Barnes, would you suggest that when you would you do this in the exam? Would you like make a few notes around the source, like trying to unpick your thoughts?
I would spend not as much time as I've just spent there doing this, but I would spend a minute and a half, 2 minutes having a look at this. Within the time frame, there is just about enough time to spend a minute, although a couple of minutes, looking at this source and just highlighting some key points, making sure that you look at the key terms, what it's asking you, what it connects to.
So getting your thoughts together,
get
the
your
points
thoughts
that you
together.
might use later on in this paper.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's good form for any exam. Make
Okay.
a few notes. So let's go back to this question here. All right, so we're thinking about what is it asking us to do? Now, if you remember these, you should do, but these are
The famous history department structure strip,
strips.
glued into exercise books across the GCSE.
What we're just going to do, we're just going to put here as some prompts. Okay. So this question is about thinking about what
So
are we doing?
we've used this as a practice, haven't we, in the history
Yeah.
department, in lessons with how to write an 8-marker. Obviously, in the exam, you'd have to go into autopilot and do this without the structure strip.
Absolutely. So it's a guidance for you, of course. It's to get you thinking about how to lay out a question, but of course you can approach it in a different form if you choose to. Now, 8 marks, 10 minutes, no longer than that. So I think I put 5 minutes on the front, didn't I? So 8 marks, 10 minutes, my apologies. Now, 2 paragraphs. Let's have a look. We'll need to identify a couple of points connected to the interpretation. We don't want to go in too much detail. And if you've got time, consider any kind of limitation about this source. But let's see, how convincing is this? Can we use this source to show that, can we make a judgment about this source? How convincing is it? Let's think. Right, what do we know? Well, we know that it is convincing. This source is convincing because, okay. And now let's have a look. We know that it was dismissed from court. Okay, so we know that. We know that he was dismissed from court. Okay, what else might it tell you about that? Okay, we might need to find out about this thing. He's dismissed from court. He fell out of favour with Elizabeth. Okay. So that would be one point you could raise to say, yes, this source is convincing because you know from your own contextual understanding that this event happened in 1592. Now, we can now, let's see, what else can we do? 1598, my mistake. Now, we might also want to think it is also convincing because, okay, what else? It's convincing because it shows the power of the Queen to make or break careers at court. It shows her power. So we know this from this image that she, surrounded by her courtiers, is the most powerful person there. All right. Now, okay.
I'm just looking at how we followed the advice so far.
So identify one point.
Yeah.
And we're giving it about the focus of the question. We're thinking about, we can quote from the picture, i.e. we would describe it this. He fell out of favour from the court. It is said here, the dismissal from court. So we'd go back there and relate to that. The picture shows that he was dismissed from court, and we know that this to be the case.
And now you started to add the reasons why it's a convincing argument, or convincing picture.
Yes, using your own subject knowledge that you know when this happened and why this happened.
Right.
Okay. And then we might then want to look at another aspect of this, why this might also be convincing, that we know that the Queen was very powerful, we know that she controlled the court, and she would use her patronage to make or break people's careers within court, and that happened with Sir Walter Raleigh in this instance. So that fact that he is walking away, she's dismissed him, she's surrounded by her courtiers, is very, very important here. Now, you might, once you've talked about that and linked that to the fact that it is convincing, you might then want to think about any limitations of this source. You may not have time for this, but if you do, you could highlight the fact that this is not convincing. However, because we're considering the career of Sir Walter Raleigh, it doesn't show his whole career. Not show that Sir Walter actually came back to court the following year, gained favour, and remained a very powerful political figure.
So is that your judgment?
Well, this is an extension of this. Two clear ways that it is convincing.
Right.
Okay, tied to your own subject knowledge. And if you have time, you could then also point out perhaps why it is not convincing.
Okay.
So you are considering in the higher order, level 4, why it is not convincing. And then make your overall judgment. Overall, this is a convincing source, or this is not a convincing source.
Okay.
That would take you through, by adding this particular point, if you have time, that would take you to your level 4 mark. Yeah, I've just checked my notes. I had it right the first time. It was 1592. There you go. The pressures of doing this, it can throw you. Have the faith. Go with your gut
He's
instinct.
a pro, really.
There we
folks.
go.
Checking his facts.
Let's consider question 2 here. All right. So, slightly different. We don't need the sources anymore. We'll put those to one side. The next question is a question that will ask you to explain some feature or development or change in Elizabethan England. Okay. In this case, the focus is poverty.
So did you just say you don't need to use the source now?
We don't need the source
Right,
anymore.
okay.
It was only for question 1. All right, there's one source only for question 1. Now, with this question here, explain what was important. When we say important, what do we mean? We mean, I suppose, significant, another way of putting that, okay, about the problem of poverty. So we're going to consider why poverty was such an issue in Elizabethan England, okay? Okay, so we'll be thinking in this question about cause and consequence, essentially causation. But if you think about cause and consequence, one thing will lead to something else. All right, let's have a look at these structure stripped again, and we'll see if we can link
So we've got
to
another
this.
version that we could use to sort of that we've practiced with in class.
So let's just put that one there. Saves my poor handwriting. You can identify this, I hope. All right, let's see. Put that there. Let's think. Okay, so we're going to think about change in continuity, cause and causation when it comes to poverty. And of course, what you're going to need is your own knowledge here. You have to bring your own knowledge and understanding of poverty. What do you know? You don't have to shoehorn everything you know about poverty into here. You do have to be selective, okay? You have to make sure that your own knowledge here actually relates to the question. Don't pepper it with everything you know. Be specific. Okay, so let's think about poverty. All right, let's think about the whole idea of poverty here. Right. So what do we know about poverty in Elizabethan England? Well, if we're going to consider one or two particular aspects, remember it's 8-mark question, which is 10 mins, which equals 2 paragraphs. Let's think, what can we say? Well, we know that poverty, okay, increased of people in poverty increased during the Elizabethan time. This was because rise in inflation. So living costs were higher, especially food. Okay, and tied to that, wages did not increase. So a rise in inflation was one particular factor, and a rise in population. All of these putting pressure on the situation in England. Now, this is a particular issue you can deal with. So the numbers of people in poverty increased, rise in inflation, rise in population. This caused, okay, so we're talking about a cause, a rise of poverty due to inflation and population. This brought about, why was this important? Because it brought about a need to address this particular problem. So it brought about a national problem that the Elizabethan government needed to address.
So the problem, the cause that you're identifying is the food.
Yeah.
And the consequence is a national problem.
Yeah.
Right.
A rise of inflation, food prices went up, wages remained the same, forced people into poverty. But food prices went up because there were bad harvests and an increasing population fighting for the same resources, which meant that general economics suggests that prices will go up in times of kind of scarcity. The people who suffered were generally the poor. Now, this created a problem that the Elizabethan government needed to address, and this brought about legislation to tackle this problem.
So this is your consequence.
Yeah.
The legislation is the consequence.
Yeah. Four laws in 1597 and then reformed in 1601. This was the first attempt to tackle this problem through legislation, effective legislation. So that would be cause, consequence.
Okay.
Tied into this, you then need to consider another cause or consequence. Okay, so we're going to think about, okay, we know that there's a rise of inflation, rise in population,
Another
creating
cause and consequence of poverty.
of poverty, yes,
Yeah.
another consequence of poverty. Let's consider what could be another consequence of this. They have to deal with this problem. Well, why do they need to deal with this problem? They need to deal with this problem because, let's think, poverty so important because as war became desperate, it led to increased crime, okay, and an increased fear in the upper classes that there might be a rebellion. So they feared that the poor may rise up and try and take things into their own hands. Elizabeth feared this because she had first-hand experience. There had been uprisings under her father, Henry, under Edward, her brother, and under Mary, her sister. So she knew the consequences. If it wasn't dealt with, then there may be further political trouble she would have to deal with. And those would be two reasons why poverty was a problem in Elizabethan England. But you don't necessarily need to do any more than that.
And we've got our key dates.
Key dates, 1597, 1601.
Our key people.
Key people. Queen Elizabeth would be key to this, and Mary, and Edward, and Henry VIII, if you want to add the wider contextual knowledge. And key terms, so inflation, population growth, okay, and here we would have, I suppose, terms in terms of rebellion.
Perfect.
That we're using. Right, let's have a look at question 3. Question 3 is the narrative account question. It's a write an account of. It's similar to question you have in the conflict paper when it's write an account of how something led to something else. In this instance, we're thinking about the Northern Rebellion affected Elizabethan England. Now, it could be a narrative account of change or development across the period, okay? Once again, you don't need to write everything you know about change in Elizabethan England, or even everything you know about the Northern Rebellion, but you do need to make sure it is specific to the question. So what are we going to need to do? We're going to need to explain briefly what the Norman Rebellion was, and then how it affected Elizabethan England. So cause and consequence. Okay, so that's your cause and consequence. Once again, All right. So this is your key. This is your focus. Focus. And this we're then thinking about how it affected Elizabethan England. 8 marks, 10 mins, 2 paragraphs. Once again, if you've got time, you can always write more, but this is just the guide. So let's take the...
We're going to use our structure strip
Once
example
again!
used in lessons to sort of guide us through the structure and layout of the question.
Let's have a look here. So it advises you to quickly plan what you will include and think about your chronological order. That's important because you are thinking about the account of the Northern Rebellion. So you do need to get it in your head. What happened here? Key individuals, key events. Okay. And then we want to think about a consequence and then another consequence. Okay, so this is the lead. We need the explanation of what it is, and to get to the higher levels, levels 3 and level 4, we'll need to consider 2 clear consequences. And we might use some of the sentence starters here. Okay, it led to one way in which life stayed the same was, well, we won't necessarily use that in this instance because life did change. We are thinking about more change than continuity here. All right, so let's think. What do we know about the Northern Rebellion? Well, let's think. Let's think about the Northern Rebellion. Was a Catholic rebellion. We need a date for that. In 1569. Okay, it was led by Earls of Northumberland and Westmoreland. They were Catholic. Okay, so that is tying into this broader understanding of Elizabethan England and the issues around religion. And that's something that is important here. We need to consider that. Okay, so what happened? Okay, during the rebellion, Durham was seized, and that's not the person, nor Durham. This is the place. So Durham was seized. Barnard Castle was taken, okay, and Hartlepool, okay, a port, if you're not familiar, was also captured. If you want to add more contextual knowledge to this, 5,000 rebels.
Would you advise to do that, Mr. Barnes?
Involved, yes. If you've got time, we need to show possibly the scale of this, and we need to kind of consider what happened. There's key information that I haven't added here is why this actually took place. Okay, the rebellion, and this might be a little bit too much here, but we're going to put this just in. We're going to put this down anyway. The rebellion, yeah. I want to see. Was a result of a failed plan by the Duke of Norfolk to support Mary, Queen of Scots' claim to the throne. Now, Mary, Queen of Scots is Catholic, Norfolk was Catholic. He thought that if he married Mary, Queen of Scots, he would be able to engineer, as an influential man within court, engineer the replacement of Elizabeth with Mary, Queen of Scots, thus restoring Catholicism to England. Now, okay, that's your contextual understanding then. What we actually need to consider to get your higher marks is actually the consequence of this. So, this affected Elizabethan England because it fueled anti-Catholic sentiment. Okay. It reinforced the message that English Catholics cannot be trusted. And tied into that, it connected to that, even though the majority of Catholics did not rise up and stayed loyal to the Queen. All right, so that'd be one point. Cause, consequence. More anti-Catholic sentiment. We know at this time period, religion is a big issue. One. Point number two. Okay. Let's think. It also led to consolidation of Elizabeth's position in the north. She had faced rebellion there, so what she did is that she confiscated land from the earls, redistributed it to those in favour. So this is an example of patronage, kind of the removal of patronage and the giving of patronage. And
What's patronage?
patronage would be essentially buying favour, if you like, influencing by either giving or taking away some form of power, wealth, position, status. So in this instance, she's removing their power, she's passing on to someone else. And she also a new council of the north to achieve this. So basically, she removed influential Catholics from their position of power and filled it with those people who were much more likely to toe the line. So consolidating her position in England at the time. So that was the cause and consequence of the Northern Rebellion.